Welcome to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case.
And I'm Renata Kiss.
And tonight, Biden sends new weapons to Israel.
Meanwhile, more lawsuits are filed over changes to Title IX.
And new evidence further connects UNRWA to Hamas. But first, we begin with all the latest on Biden and Israel, where yesterday the president notified Congress that he had approved a new $1 billion weapons package for Israel. Biden's announcement comes less than a week after he halted a shipment of precision bombs to Israel over its operations in Rafah. That's a move that drew backlash from Democrats and Republicans alike. And while this latest package still won't include those bombs, it does include tank ammunition, mortar rounds, along with tactical vehicles. White House spokesman John Kirby said last week that President Biden remains committed to ensuring Israel has the means to defend itself against Hamas. Meanwhile, House Speaker Mike Johnson said he supports the new package.
At the same time, President Biden is placing new tariffs on Chinese imports. A White House press release said yesterday that the president seeks to protect American jobs from unfair Chinese trade practices, including imported technology like electric vehicles, batteries, solar equipment, and other products. Here's what the president had to say.
I'm determined that the future of electric vehicles will be made in America by union workers, period. And we'll do it by following international trade laws to do it. American companies are investing tens of billions of dollars in electric vehicles and batteries. And thanks to my bipartisan infrastructure law, we're building a network of 500,000 charging stations all across America.
Biden's tariffs on Chinese products will affect $18 billion of imports, and they starkly contrast his 2019 stance on Chinese tariffs, which then candidate Biden called abusive. When White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre was asked why the sudden change of tune, she evaded the question.
So look, I'm going to be really mindful. I'm going to let in due order. You'll hear directly from the president, directly from us. So don't want to get ahead of that. Jake said it really well when he was here. We have always had concerns on China's unfair trade policies. We've been very clear about that.
Of course, the change comes just in time for the elections. Biden has been saying that the U.S. needs a new industrial policy, perhaps to compete with former President Trump and his economic policies.
And even more lawsuits are now in the works against Biden's expansion of Title IX to include protections for gender identity and transgender students. This week alone, Moms for Liberty, Young America's Foundation, also known as YAF, alongside the AGs of Kansas, Wyoming, Utah, and Alaska, became the latest to challenge the new rules, and they join a growing number of states, students, and legal groups all suing the federal government.
We are working with the Attorney General. We have filed a lawsuit to fight back against what Biden's trying to do with Title IX.
I'm glad that I live in a state where there are laws that protect women's sports and women's only spaces. But the new rules threaten our state laws. So I'm joining a lawsuit to ask a court to step in and stop these new changes.
We just filed a critical new lawsuit against the Biden administration with the great state of Texas and the fearless Ken Paxton. Together, we are going to stop the Biden administration from imposing radical transgender ideology on schools all across this country.
Under the new rules, it would be considered discriminatory to quote-unquote misgender a transgender student or bar them from the bathroom of their choice. YAF called the new rule unconscionable, saying that it basically forces schools to repeat and live the lie that men can be women. Meanwhile, a number of Republican-led states have already pledged to ignore the changes.
Meanwhile, prominent TikTok content creators are suing the government over its controversial plan to either sell or shut down the Chinese-owned app on U.S. soil. 3 TikTok influencers who collectively boast over 10 million followers sued the federal government yesterday, saying the government's proposed action undermines the nation's founding principles and free marketplace of ideas. This is the second lawsuit challenging the bipartisan law that wants to detangle U.S. data from the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. TikTok has already sued the government for alleged violations of the app's First Amendment rights. And while TikTok is trying to protect its American user base, content creators are trying to save their source of income. Roughly 170 million Americans use TikTok as of this reporting.
And the results are in from yesterday's primaries in Maryland, West Virginia, and Nebraska. And of course, it should probably go without saying that Donald Trump and Joe Biden saw some easy victories, although Joe Biden does continue to face a small number of uncommitted protest votes over his handling of Israel. Meanwhile, on a more local level, Maryland Republicans nominated popular two-term Governor Larry Hogan as their Senate candidate in the hopes of flipping a seat long held by Democrats this November. And in West Virginia, Republicans there chose term-limited Governor Jim Justice as their nominee to replace outgoing Democratic Senator Joe Manchin in what the GOP expects to be a rather easy victory later this year.
And meanwhile, President Biden is now agreeing to debate Trump on TV. In a new video posted on his social media accounts, President Biden boldly declared his acceptance to debate the former president. Take a look.
Donald Trump lost 2 debates to me in 2020. And since then, he hadn't shown up for debate. Now he's acting like he wants to debate me again. Well, make my day, pal. I'll even do it twice. So let's pick the dates, Donald. I hear you're free on Wednesdays.
Biden then posted that he had accepted an invitation from CNN to debate the former president on June 27th. The Trump campaign replied, quote, "Joe Biden has finally accepted President Trump's debate challenge. President Trump and our campaign have been requesting this for months with a consistent message. Anytime, anywhere, any place." Trump himself confirmed his appearance for the debate, saying, quote, "It is my great honor to accept the CNN debate against crooked Joe Biden." He added that he also accepted another debate on ABC News in September. And up next, we look at the news on the war in Gaza and in Ukraine, as well as other international coverage when we get back from this break.
For $28, you can sponsor an ultrasound scan that will enable an abortion-minded woman to hear the heartbeat of her baby. 90% of the time when this happens, that sound will change a woman's mind and cause her to keep the baby. And guess what? An anonymous donor is matching your gift. For every 200 scans underwritten, an ultrasound machine will be purchased and placed in a life-saving preborn clinic. Go to preborn.com/FISM to give today. That's preborn.com/FISM.
Navigating through investment options can be challenging, especially when you're determined to uphold your God-given values. Every dollar you invest is a vote for the world that you want to live in. Let your values guide your investment decisions and help to shape the culture in which we live. Become a beacon of light and pave the way with biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, where faith and finance collide. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
Did you know that you can always listen and watch Financial Issues online? Just go to financialissues.org/live or download the FISM TV app in the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. We stream our show every weekday morning starting at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. If you're looking for a biblical take on investing and current events and how it relates to the money that God has given you, then you don't want to miss Financial Issues.
Welcome back to FISM News. I'm Renata Kiss. Well, we start with some rather interesting news from Israel. The Washington Examiner reports that 2 Israeli officials are calling to annex Gaza and disperse the Palestinians amid doubts that Israel could defeat Hamas. Here's what Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir said at a rally yesterday.
The solution is to go back home, to go back to the land of Israel. The solution is to not let the army of an enemy manage Gaza. The solution is what the Torah tells us. It's to liberate, to settle, and to expel.
He added that it is moral to encourage the voluntary emigration of the residents of Gaza. However, according to the UN and other Western nations, this move would violate international law. Even some Israeli families said that Gavor's hard-right influence on Netanyahu has been the reason why the hostages haven't been released yet. But Israeli Communications Minister Shlomo Harid doesn't agree. He said, quote, "In order to preserve the security achievements for which so many of our troops gave up their lives, we must settle Gaza with security forces and with settlers."
Meanwhile, still in the war, a UN agency is once again being targeted by Israel over claims of working with Hamas. FISM's Ian Patrick has these very disturbing details.
Recent reports are attempting to add evidence to a deeper link between Hamas and a United Nations agency, despite that agency's claim to being neutral. That UN group in question is the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees. And if that sounds familiar, it's because the agency has been heavily scrutinized lately for alleged ties to Hamas. Some of their employees were even accused of participating in the October 7th attack on Israel, and those employees are still under investigation at the moment. But a separate investigative group commissioned by the UN said last month that the agency did not appear to be compromised by the terrorist group. However, new reports coming from the Israeli government are trying to prove otherwise. For example, an Israeli airstrike yesterday targeted a Hamas command room, which they say was based out of a UNRWA school, UNRWA being the shortened version of that UN agency. As the Israeli Defense Forces continues its campaign to eliminate Hamas, they've discovered multiple Hamas locations hidden beneath civilian infrastructure already. This most recent discovery was made in the Gazan city of Nusayrat and resulted in the deaths of 15 terror operatives, including 10 Hamas members. And some of those now deceased members of Hamas were confirmed to actually have participated in the October 7th attack. But Israel's official X account also shared a video yesterday allegedly showing Hamas terrorists inside an UNRWA compound at Rafah. The video, captured by an IDF drone, was further detailed by IDF spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner on the social media platform. He said the following, quote, "Gunmen, likely Hamas terrorists, hanging out at an UNRWA warehouse in eastern Rafah." He later said, quote, "The hypocrisy is astounding." That, of course, being a reference to UNRWA's claim of neutrality. In another post, Lieutenant Colonel Lerner laid out a list of reasons why he said that this was hypocritical, and that includes the fact that UNRWA does not allow weapons on any of their sites. And that was actually a response to some who claimed that the gunmen were just acting as police to protect humanitarian aid from being looted. In addition, a later part of that same video shows the gunmen apparently shooting at people outside of the compound for reasons we are not quite sure about yet. Regardless, these examples seem to add fuel to Israel's claim that this UN agency is not at all neutral towards Hamas, at least. This accusation has been levied against UNRWA for years now. Actually, the agency had to defend itself all the way back in 2014 upon the discovery of Hamas rockets beneath another school in Gaza. And we'll have to see if this new batch of evidence will at all convince the United Nations or any other body to look once again into the embattled Palestinian Aid Agency. This is Ian Patrick reporting for FISM News.
Thanks for that report, Ian. Well, moving elsewhere in the world now, a former official for the DEA is claiming that there might soon be a new dangerous drug in the U.S. Former DEA Special Operations Director Derek Malt Sr. claimed that this new drug is an opioid called nitazenes. The dangerous drug is reportedly stronger than fentanyl. But Malt specifically points a finger for this new drug at China, saying that it is a part of their plan to destabilize and destroy America under the disguise of drug addiction. The U.S. has previously taken action against China for its alleged role in fueling the American opioid crisis. China established some connections with Mexican drug cartels, which notably smuggled the drugs across the border. But Malt says that China is moving to a more deadly attack with the nitazenes and that they are beyond fentanyl. Malt also aired similar concerns of Chinese involvement with marijuana and its potential impact on the U.S.
But that's not the only threat. Terrorist groups in Afghanistan and Pakistan are now gaining strength, at least according to a new report from the congressionally established watchdog group known as the United States Institute of Peace. And they say that groups like ISIS-K and others are a growing threat to the U.S. along with allied interests following the withdrawal from Afghanistan. For example, after the Taliban returned to power, they appear to have offered shelter to al-Qaeda's chief in Kabul. The watchdogs warn that the Taliban support goes far beyond just shelter and is providing material support to terrorists. They're now advising the Biden administration to increase terror surveillance and loosen restrictions on counterterrorism operations.
Meanwhile, hundreds of French law enforcement officers are on a manhunt after a deadly ambush freed a 30-year-old inmate and drug dealer known as The Fly. His real name is Mohamed Amra, and he was charged with a deadly kidnapping with suspicions of gang ties. The prisoner was being moved from court to prison yesterday when another car rammed the transport van. The assailants then opened fire on the prison guards, tragically killing 2 and critically wounding 2 others. It's the first time that France has lost on-duty prison workers since 1992. French President Emmanuel Macron wrote on social media that everything is being done to find the perpetrators. Police have blocked roads across northwest France and are now chasing down leads in a race to find the prisoner. And up next, we cover more from the U.S., including an update to the Baltimore Bridge and that we haven't heard about in a while. But first, let's go to a moment in history.
Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Udinsky. Well, the Crusades, while controversial, have nonetheless achieved legendary status in the hearts of Christians for the last 1,000 years, in part because of the mythical heroes they involved. We've talked about many on this show. In the victorious First Crusade, there was among the Franks a man of this type of mythical heroism, a massive Norman warrior who stood on the front lines of this successful campaign of European nobles to free the Holy Land from the Turks. He was Bohemond I, Crusader prince and scourge of the Turks in the Near East. Now, Bohemond was born in the mid-11th century to a noble Norman family on the Italian peninsula. He was given the Christian name Mark at birth, but he was nicknamed Bohemond, named after the medieval myth giant warrior, and the name was well-deserved. Bohemond was the ideal Christian knight. He was religiously pious, he was a skilled fighter, and he was mighty in stature. Now, he would spend his life campaigning against several of the apocalyptic foes of Western medieval Christendom. First, it was against the Eastern Christian Byzantine Empire in the Mediterranean with his father, where he honed his skills and gained notoriety as a mighty warrior. But this first act in his life was merely a prologue for his acts of greatest prestige later in life, where he would travel further east than the Byzantine territory to the Holy Land itself, which had been, for the last 400 years, violently occupied by Muslim Turks. Christians in the Holy Land lived under constant threat of death, land seizure, and enslavement from their ruling Muslim warlords. As such, many of the thousands of knights who took the cross following Urban II's call to crusade in 1095 did so with pious and noble intentions, and Bohemond was one of these. He quickly became one of the chief leaders of the Prince's Crusade. Now, returning to the enemy he once fought in Constantinople first, Bohemond negotiated an uneasy truce with Byzantine Emperor Alexios Komnenos. Alexios' daughter Anna chronicled much of this interaction and captured for us a clear and ideal picture of Bohemond. She wrote this of the Crusader, quote, "The appearance of this man was, to put it briefly, unlike that of any other man, whether Greek or barbarian, seen in those days on Roman soil. His stature was such that he towered almost a full cubit over the tallest man. He was slender of waist and flanks, with broad shoulders and chest, strong in the arms. Overall, he was neither too slender nor too heavily built, but fleshly, but perfectly proportioned." Well, Bohemond was as mighty in battle as he was handsome, according to Anna. He displayed great heroism at Nicaea and Antioch and was influential in the successful Christian recapture of these lands. For his courage at Antioch, he was hailed as the city's ruling prince, and the Principality of Antioch would become vital in the continuation of the Crusades for the next 2 centuries. Now, Bohemond spent the remainder of his life doing battle, mostly back with his eternal frenemies, the Byzantines. He would also return to Europe, he would marry, and he would have a son in his old age before his death in the year 1111. Thanks so much for joining me once again for A Moment in History.
Many mothers find strength in the experience of giving birth as they overcome physical challenges and embrace the journey of bringing a new life into the world. You can help an abortion-minded mother receive discipleship, encouragement, and the strength needed to have her baby. During the month of May, you can bless your mom for Mother's Day by giving to Preborn on your mother's behalf. Go to preborn.com/FISM to give. That's preborn.com/FISM.
Are you new to biblically responsible investing? As Christians, we have the responsibility to be good stewards of the money God has entrusted us with. As we invest in the market, we want to make sure that the companies we invest in aren't taking money and using it to fund industries that grieve the heart of God, like pornography, abortion, gambling, or the LGBT agenda. That doesn't mean a company must be a Christian company to be biblically responsible. It means that company is solely focused on excellence in its industry and doesn't support things that God hates. To learn more about biblically responsible investing and how you can put it to practice in your portfolio, go to financialissues.org.
The mission of Financial Issues is to expose Jesus for all he is, all he means, and all that he can do.
Hey there, welcome back to FISM News. Once again, I'm Samuel Case. Well, as Renata said before the break back there, we do start with this update where federal investigators have now released a preliminary report on the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore. That report suggests the ship that crashed into the bridge had lost power 4 times in the hours leading up to the crash on March 26th. As you know, 6 people were killed in that collapse, one of whom is still missing. A final report is expected in the next 1 to 2 years, but we here at FISM News will report on any developments in the meantime.
Meanwhile, a Harvard anti-Israel encampment gained key concessions and is now disbanding after 3 weeks of protests. Yesterday's announcement comes only days after Harvard suspended over 20 students for their involvement in the protest. The school's interim president capitulated to demands to reverse suspensions. Protesters also scored meetings to discuss establishing a Center for Palestine Studies at Harvard and divesting from Israeli companies. As a result, Harvard can now hold graduation ceremonies as planned. But protest leaders hinted they aren't done. They posted an ominous warning on social media: "Harvard, beware, the liberated zone is everywhere." Meanwhile, a University of Delaware student crossed from protest to criminal conduct when she destroyed a Holocaust memorial on campus during a profanity-laced tirade. The 23-year-old female spit on and destroyed flags that represented 10,000 victims. She has now been charged with a hate crime and 2 other misdemeanors.
Now, I really understand Harvard wanting to get on with graduation and everything, but it really seems to me that this is just going to encourage bad behavior because, you know, they basically got what they wanted by rioting and behaving really badly. This seems like parenting 101 almost.
Yeah, it's really tragic to see how far Harvard has fallen as far as quality of education, and just it's sad to see how much they don't have a backbone when it comes to these issues.
Yeah. Well, maybe they'll learn because it looks like they're not done yet. We'll have to see if they stick to their guns in the future.
Right.
Meanwhile, a pro-life activist was sentenced to almost 5 years in prison yesterday for blocking an abortion clinic in Washington, D.C. Her name is Lauren Handy. She was convicted of 2 FACE Act violations last year and has been serving time since August. Back in 2020, Handy led a group of activists in blocking a clinic belonging to Dr. Cesare Santangelo, a doctor who previously said he would not help a baby who survived an abortion.
We are not letting Santangelo in this abortion facility today. Under no circumstances will he be allowed to kill anyone.
In 2022, the DOJ raided Handy's home. This is very disturbing. They uncovered the remains of 5 babies, apparently victims of partial birth and even post-birth abortions by that doctor. One of Handy's fellow activists has already received a 10-month prison sentence, and the others will be sentenced sometime later this month.
Truly disturbing, but on some like in better news, that is. Meanwhile, in sports, Kansas City Chief kicker Harrison Butker is receiving quite the blowback for his recent commencement speech at a Catholic college. The NFL kicker did not shy away from voicing his conservative Christian values in front of the 2024 Benedictine College graduating class. He criticized both the current political situation and the culture as a whole for America's degeneration. Here he is.
Bad policies and poor leadership have negatively impacted major life issues. Things like abortion, IVF, surrogacy, euthanasia, as well as a growing support for degenerate cultural values in media, all stem from the pervasiveness of disorder.
He then called out President Biden for his phony Catholic faith connected to his loose stance on abortion.
Our own nation is led by a man who publicly and proudly proclaims his Catholic faith, but at the same time is delusional enough to make the sign of the cross during a pro-abortion rally. He has been so vocal in his support for the murder of innocent babies that I'm sure to many people, it appears that you can be both Catholic and pro-choice.
But he probably got the most flack for saying that a woman is more likely to be fulfilled as a homemaker than by chasing a career. He proudly showcased his wife, Isabel, as that example.
For the ladies present today, congratulations on an amazing accomplishment. You should be proud of all that you have achieved to this point in your young lives. I want to speak directly to you briefly because I think it is you, the women, who have had the most diabolical lies told to you. Isabel's dream of having a career might not have come true, but if you asked her today if she has any regrets on her decision, she would laugh out loud without hesitation and say, heck no.
So it's encouraging to see someone so outspoken with their Christian beliefs there. Meanwhile, from Florida to California, thousands gathered for baptism events across the U.S. this weekend, kicking off what's being called a Summer of Baptisms. Hundreds of people were baptized at Pirates Cove Beach in California, while 130 others gave their lives to Christ in Ozark, Missouri. Core group leader Jenny Weaver, she kicked off the event in Sarasota, Florida on Saturday. She also asked fellow members of her ministry to hold baptisms in Louisiana, Tennessee, California, Texas, and Missouri. She said, quote, "The Lord spoke to me and he literally said, Summer of Baptism." She described this past weekend as absolutely a move of God. All right, and before we close out our show for today, I would like to remind all of you to come alongside our friends over at Preborn to support them this month for their ongoing Mother's Day drive.
And for as little as $28, you can provide an ultrasound scan, and Preborn will be gifted an ultrasound machine for every 200 scans as part of a donor match. You can help them meet their goal of providing 50 of these machines by visiting preborn.com/FISM. That's preborn.com/FISM. Well, that's our program for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and please visit FISMnews.tv for more.
And for more updates until our next show, you can always find us on social media on your favorite platforms. Just type in @FISM News to find us, or you can download the FISM app. Thanks so much. God bless, and we'll catch you tomorrow night with more news.